Morning, everyone. Just doing my greetings. And good morning, Art. I suspect that is you as the first arriver. Let's see. Anyway, okay. Last week we began with incantations, and I did not have ready the images for the incantations. So what I want to do now is share with you a few of these images. And I went back and realized that this one was a particularly good one. And so I wanted to, I just wanted to show it to you, and I'll read this incantation again. Then we'll come back and talk about these a little bit. I wanted to do the first three here. So I'm backing up to the incantation that has this image with it. And there's three that we read last week, but I'm going to quickly go through them. Can you hear me, Lynn? I presume so. Yeah. Okay. I cannot hear you, but that's okay. Unless you want to unmute. All right. So this is incantation with the image number 54. And mind you, Jung is in the night in which he has put Izdubar in the egg. And so he's falling back on an ancient practice, which is incantations, in order to realize Izdubar in his unconscious or in his psyche, and maybe in his consciousness. And so here he's reflecting that in his image, that here's how the world began. And let's see.
What page are you on, Skip?
Well, I am on page 300.
Thank you.
And okay. I should read this footnote for image number 54, or two footnotes. In dreams, Jung noted on January 3rd, 1917, and by in dreams, we mean the book Dreams by C.G. Jung. Jung noted on January 3rd, 1917, in Liber Novus, which is the Red Book, snake image number 3, incent, I-N-C-E-N-T. I'm not sure what he means by that. Stimulus to snake image 3 in Liber Novus. This notation appears to refer to this image. And then footnote number 127, image legend Brahmanaspati. Julius Egeland notes that Brihaspati or Brahmanaspati, the Lord of Prayer or Worship, takes the place of Agni as the representative of the priestly dignity. And in Rig Veda number 10, 68 to 69, Brihaspati is said to have found Avindat, the dawn, the sky, and the fire, Agni, and to have chased away the darkness with his light, Arka or sun. He seems rather to represent the element of light and fire generally, from the Sacred Books of the East, volume 12, page XVI, which is 16, I guess, in the in the introduction. Okay, so I'll read the incantation. Amen, you are Lord of the beginning. Amen, you are star of the east. Amen, you are the flower that blooms over everything. Amen, you are the deer that breaks out of the forest. Amen, you are the song that sounds far over the water. Amen, you are the beginning and the end. Any comment, Lynn, on this?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so imagery, Jung says, I speak in images, and so I'm not going to interpret this further, except to suggest that as the earth has evolved, it's spewed up out of the lava. And I don't know what he was getting at exactly here, but he had these ideas in his head. Okay, so good morning, Jordan. Nice to see you.
Oh, good morning.
And good morning, Michelle. Nice to see you.
Skip,
okay.
Judith is trying to get on. Her computer isn't working. I just got a message.
Okay. I'm gonna move on to the next image, and
One quick thing about that image, to me, it's interesting, the psyche. He's starting with the snake that comes out of the egg.
right.
And so we're always transcending boundaries to individuate to next identity.
Yeah, thank you. That's a useful way of thinking about it.
I
Okay.
think just one quote I would use for it is, I can't swim the same river twice.
Yeah.
Tomorrow I have grown and the river has moved on, but I'm still me and it's still the river I love. So identity doesn't go away, but the evolution continues.
And was that a Jung quote, or whose quote is that?
I think it's probably more Rumi or Hafiz.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it's Jung, but
Yeah.
I can't swim the same river twice is such a poignant way to, I think, express this image.
Right. Okay. Yep, it sounds like Rumi. So moving on. All right, so there is a big footnote for this image, and I want to read it to you. The solar barge is a common motif in ancient Egypt. The barge was seen as the typical means of movement of the sun. In Egyptian mythology, the sun god struggled against the monster Apophis, who attempted to swallow the solar barge as it traveled across the heavens each day. In Transformations and Symbols of the Libido, Jung discussed the Egyptian living sun disk and the motif of the sea monster. In his 1952 revision of this text, he noted that the battle with the sea monster represented this attempt to free ego consciousness from the grip of the unconscious. That's from Symbols of Transformation, Collected Works 5, paragraph 539. The solar barge resembles some of the illustrations in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and the vignettes on pages 390, 400, and 404. The oarsman is usually a falcon-headed Horus. The night journey of the sun god through the underworld is depicted in the Amduat, which has been seen as symbolic process of transformation. See Theodore Apt and Eric Horning knowledge of the afterlife, the Egyptian Amduat, a quest for immortality. And that's from Zurich Living Human Heritage, Publications 203. Okay, so I just have to check and see if, okay, Judith did make it aboard. Good. So I didn't have to admit her. Hi, Judith, welcome. All right, so I'm going to share the screen again. And we are on this image that relates to this incantation. And
Actually, if I may, there's an image I think that goes with the solar barge. I have a scarab beetle little piece here that I can show. The solar barge is a symbol also of not only the eternal afterlife, but enlightenment.
right.
And if you look, if you unshare the screen, I'll show this.
Okay, just a minute. Okay.
And I think this goes with the egg. This is
yeah.
the scarab. But what's interesting, it's the dung beetle, which rolls a dung ball backwards. So it's a symbol of the birth and death, recycling, composting nature into a form. But if you look at this is like a top view of the human skull, the sagittal suture and the coronal suture. And what happens is when these wing casings click open, the wings come out, it flies. It's a symbol of the flight of the higher mind or enlightenment. So this would be the egg that then the solar barge emerges from in Egyptian mythology.
Right. Okay. But
It's
we're still,
top.
yeah, I don't want to digress too much. The beetle, if you want to read more about it, it's in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. There's a reference to Jung's experience with one of his clients who was having a difficulty breaking through, and suddenly a beetle appeared. But I want to see if we can get through this today, so we need to not digress too much. And so I'm going to put this barge back up here so that we can read this incantation. Now, these are incantations over Izdubar. Jung has persuaded the god Izdubar. This is in his imagination. He knows it's in his imagination. And he has told Izdubar about Western science. And this has afflicted Izdubar because he realizes that among other things, there's no land of the gods in the Western lands, and he can't be healed there, and he gets sick, and he has spent a night. Izdubar and Jung have spent a night by the fire, and Jung wakes up in the morning and convinces Izdubar that if he accepts that he is the figment of Jung's imagination, of his psyche, that he may be able to heal him. And so Izdubar raucously responds, "Would it help?" and so Jung decides he's going to reduce Izdubar to the size of an egg and put the god in the egg, and then carry him into the West. And so God in Jung's psyche is in the egg in his imagination, and Jung has not opened the egg yet in his imagination, in this active imagination that he's working with. And he has decided to do an ancient practices of incantation. So that's what we're doing here. We're reading these incantations that Jung is saying over Izdubar. And so this is the one that goes with this image. One word that was never spoken, one light that was never lit, an unparalleled confusion, and a road without end. Okay, so that's what Jung, that's the incantation that's written in German at the top of page 55. This is page 55 of the original Red Book. Okay, moving on. Let's see.
Oh, Skip, I have one
Yes.
question really quick.
Yeah.
Did Carl Jung take art classes or did he teach himself?
I think he taught himself pretty much. I don't remember him taking art classes per se, but in those days, remember, these were the days before radio and television. And so people had to amuse themselves in the evening. And so, for example, people became excellent pianists and had pianos in their homes because that's how they could amuse themselves and others. And I think people worked on art and other things to amuse themselves in the evening. And or they read stories or told stories, but there was no light essentially. I mean, by the time Jung is doing this, his house is no doubt electrified, but for most people, they aren't electrified. There's no plumbing per se. My family farm was not electrified and plumbed until 1956. So people were living pretty primitively in those days. And of course, the image of the home behind me is significant. And I want to mention one reason that it's particularly significant is I've been talking a little bit about doing these Rockies, which is an art form that I'm using to be an archaeologist in my own psyche. And so I'm using it to drill down into my psyche. And I'm not convinced I've gotten that deep yet, but what Jung did was when he built this house, which is called Bollingen, he did not plumb it and he did not electrify it intentionally. And the reason was that he wanted to live as a man of the 15th or 16th century would have lived. And he said the only thing that would give him away if a man of the 16th century came to this house was the matches. I mean, he literally had a well next to the house and he pumped his own water. He wanted to live not with the overlay of the modern world on his psyche. He wanted to be there so that he could dredge up the things that were in his psyche that were there from long ago. And that's what he was doing. And actually this period, this Red Book period, is actually happening in Kusnacht because he didn't begin this until 1921. And so we're talking about 1913-14 in the Red Book. And so, but because he had that experience in Kusnacht, he wanted to have access to something deep in his own soul. And so he spent about 20 years or more building Bollingen. He built it in 4 goes. The first part was this tower the first part was this part, which was built like a African hut. And then he thereafter built it in three more stages after this stage. And he built it with his bare hands. He was the stonemason primarily. He did have a workman or two helping him, but he was actually making the stone. He built everything that's in Bollingen. And I'm sure that it would be quite fascinating to visit this place. But at the moment, it's not open to the public. It would be great if we could see it, but we cannot. And apparently he painted a lot of images on the walls and up and down the stairs of it and so on. And we're not allowed to see those yet. And
I think it's important. You mentioned, archaeology of your psyche. You're mining, mining, the midnight ocean, but like an archaeologist in the earth. And then from that oceanic archaeology, the Rocky with your students became the Milky Way. So you went so far in with them, it goes so far out. And so the both and occurred in that Rocky with the
I had
kid.
a question.
yes, Michelle, go
I
ahead.
did. Oh,
Go ahead, Michelle. You muted yourself.
I was talking to my husband. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're not talking to us. All right, fine. Yeah. Yeah, I feel sure that that's the tip of the collective unconscious iceberg. Okay, in other words, that mural was produced by 600 students and me over a 4-week period.
Mhm.
And each one had the opportunity to make their own mark on the mural. Okay, and we're going to do something similar to that at Confluence 23. And by the way, the registration for Confluence 23 is open, and you can now register. We are only accepting 50 people at the event, including the organizers. So there's only going to be 40 seats or so. And so we're now opening it. The first to register actually did so a month ago. And that is Penelope Ryder from London is coming. And I'm very hopeful that Khushbu will come from India and that Lana will come from Qatar, although she's a Palestinian, because both of them took a part in last year's Confluence. So it's confluence23.org. I'll put that in the chat later. But okay, so what I want to get at is that the environment we're in right now is that Jung has the egg in his imagination. He's kind of afraid to open it, which you'll see in one of these later images. And he's following the ancient practice of incantation. So the Egyptian barge was the first thing that we talked about today after the snake. And so this is the next one. It's very short. I forgive myself these words as you also forgive me for wanting your blessing light. I presume he's talking to himself and Isdabar in this case. All right, so I'm going to move on to 57 now, which we did not read today last week. And this is the way it looks in the Red Book. Rise up, you gracious fire of old night. I kiss the threshold of your beginning. My hand prepares the rug and spreads abundant red flowers before you. Rise up, my friend. You who lack sick, you who lay sick, break through the shell. We have prepared a meal for you. Gifts have been prepared for you. Dancers await you. Okay, so this is what he is he's praying to Izdubar and in the egg, but he hasn't opened the egg yet. Okay.
In the last line of, we have built a house for you.
Well, there's more. We have built a house for you. Your servants stand ready. We drove herds together for you on green fields. We filled your cup with red wine. We set out fragrant fruit on golden dishes. We knock at your prisons and we knock at your prison and lay our ears against it. The hours lengthen. Tarry no longer. We are wretched without you, and our song is worn out. Okay, so he's expressing how society might feel if there was no God, okay, I suppose. And so let me go in. Is there comment about this before I go on?
I think the only thing I'd say is, especially on the golden dishes, because not just a symbol of luxury and riches, gold doesn't tarnish. So in a sense, this fragrant fruit is an eternal metaphor, because it's not going to have bacteria or rot because of the golden dish. So it's pure in that we set out fragrant fruit. It's not influenced by the gold, but it's presented as if it's from the sun.
Right. Okay. So moving on, here's the next incantation. We are miserable without you and wear out our songs. We spoke all the words that our heart gave us. What else do you want? What else shall we fulfill for you? We open every door for you. We bend our knees where you want us to. We go to all points of the compass according to your wish. We carry up what is below, and we turn what is above into what is below, as you command. We give and take according to your wish. We wanted to turn right, but you go left, obedient to your sign. We rise and we fall. We sway and we remain still. We see and we are blind. We hear and we are deaf. We say yes and no, always hearing your word. We do not comprehend and we live the incomprehensible. We do not love and we live the unloved. And we evolve around ourselves again and comprehend and live the understandable. We love and live the loved, true to your law. Come to us, we who are willing from your own will, from our own will. Come to us, we who understand from our own spirit. Come to us, we who will warm you at our own fire. Come to us, we who will heal you with our own art. Come to us, we who will produce you out of our own body. Come, child, to father and mother. Okay. So this again is a long incantation. There's a footnote to it. Footnote 129. In dreams, in the book Dreams, Jung wrote, 17 January 1917, tonight awful and formidable avalanches come crashing down the mountainside. Like utterly nightmarish clouds, they will fill the valley on whose rim I am standing on the opposite side. I know that I must take flight up the mountain to avoid the dreadful catastrophe. This dream is explained in the Black Book in strange terms. In an entry bearing the same date, January 17th, 1917, I produced a drawing with red spots on page 58 of the Red Book. On the 18th of January, 1917, I produced a drawing, wait a minute. On the 18th, I read about the current formation of huge sunspots. The following is a paraphrase of the entry in Black Book 6 for January 17th, 1917. Jung asks what it is that fills him with fear and horror. What is falling down from the high mountain? His soul tells him to help the gods, to sacrifice to them. She tells him that the worm crawls up to heaven. It begins to cover the stars, and with a tongue of fire, he eats the dome of the seven blue heavens. She tells him that he will also be eaten and that he should crawl into the stone and wait in the narrow casing until the torrent of fire is over. Snow falls from the mountains because the fiery breath falls down from above the clouds. The god is coming. Jung should get ready to receive him. Jung should hide himself in stone, as the god is a terrible fire. He should remain quiet and look within so that the god does not consume him in flames. And that's from page 152 of Black Book 6, apparently.
I love the correspondence to the Three Little Pigs, because, you know, the house of straw, house of twigs, house of brick, and he's hiding in a house of stone. So the wolf is that fiery, dangerous, catastrophic creature, and God is in the same here in a metaphor.
Yeah. Okay, so Jung is feeling certainly the collective unconscious bearing upon him. World War I is in high cry in 1917. 1917 was the year the United States entered World War I. It had been going for 3 years before we entered. And so Jung is feeling the pressure of the collective unconscious, and he's trying to find an answer about what God is and means, I think, for himself. Okay, so here's the next image. And it says, we asked earth, we asked heaven, we asked the sea, we asked the wind, we asked the fire. We looked for you with all the peoples. We looked for you with all the kings. We looked for you with all the wise. We looked for you in our own heads and hearts, and we found you in the egg. And that brings up image 6. And so at the bottom of this image, you see the egg. The footnote here reads, image legend Hiranyagarbha. In the Rig Veda, Hiranyagarbha was the primal seed from which Brahma was born. In Jung's copy of volume 32 of the Sacred Books of the East, the Vedic hymns, the only section that is cut is the opening one, a hymn to the unknown God. This begins, in the beginning, there arose the golden child, Hiranyagarbha. As soon as born, he alone was the Lord of all that is. He established the earth and the heaven. Who is the God to whom we shall offer sacrifice? In Jung's copy of the Upanishads, in the Sacred Books of the East, there is a piece of paper inserted near page 311 of the Maitreya Brahmana Upanishad, a passage describing the self which begins, and the same self is also called Hiranyagarbha. Okay, so he's equating the self as we discuss it in Jungian psychology. He's equating it to Hiranyagarbha here. Okay, any comments on that? And I'm going to take this image off, but please do note the egg that's at the bottom of all of this.
I have a question about that, Skip. I guess I think it's because I've studied Vedic literature, and when they talk about the self, they're talking about the transcendent self, not the personal self. So I'm kind of questioning this parallel.
Well,
with Hiranyagarbha.
well, Jung, when he's talking about the self, he is talking about the transcendent self also. And that's why I equate it. But so, you know, the self is not me, myself, and I. Okay, the self is much larger than us, and as we get into the collective unconscious, the collective has a self, but it's the collective of all human beings, all humanity on Earth. Okay, and so the collective so at one point in his letters, Jung equates God with the unconscious, and so there's the personal God, which is me, myself, and I suppose, and that's a kind of duality. But the transcendent self, the self that's in the collective unconscious, which he discovered during this late 1913, early 1914 period, that self, and which he's also connecting with in this moment. And keeping in mind that he already has written Psychology of the Unconscious, or he's already written Transformation of the Libido. And he's had his break with Freud. So he knows a lot of things, but he's now having a direct experience with the self. He's recognizing that what he's talking about is in terms of a God Izdubar, is his imagination of a God, okay, a personal God, perhaps. But he's also recognizing at the same time, it seems to me, that he's recognizing that it is transcendent. It's beyond him. And that's partially why he's afraid to open this egg at this moment, at the moment that he's writing this incantation. Sorry, he's connecting it with the Hiranyagarbha, which is transcendent, I guess, in the sense of Hinduism.
I think that's an important distinction you make with the Hiranyagarbha, because the transcendent self, and then Jung is coming at it from that the self is innately divine. So I think that transcendent piece is, I'm glad you brought that up, because instead of the self, I'm going to have individuation, I'm going to have psychological development, I'm going to further get to know myself. Those things are all wonderful, but they're also kind of mundane in a psychological sense. But when you bring in the transcendent self, that then pens that innate divinity to it that I think gives it the real robustness that it needs from that different traditions.
And so the God to which all religions point, one way or another, is transcendent, and it's not the collective unconscious of the United States or the collective unconscious of us, but we all feel it one way or another, and we've all been trying to describe it since as long as there's been human writing and communication. And Go ahead, Michelle first, then Judith. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thanks. I just wanted to mention, like a couple of weeks ago, you had mentioned you and Kushpu had done the Bhagavad-Gita. It was 10 for something 10, and then you had said verses 8 to 10, where Krishna spoke about his essence, but I looked at it and I think it was the video after that. Verse 10, lines, I think it was something to 18, 11 to 18.
Well, it was actually 10:19, I think. And I can put my finger on that reading because that is transcendent and it's relevant to this conversation.
One more thing. They're coming out with the Oppenheimer movie. So
yes.
it kind of, in my mind, I'm very right-brained from military trauma and all that. Like it's pushed me into the right brain. So
right.
they go together to me. So that's just why I'm mentioning it.
What's your question, Michelle?
Yeah.
Why you're bringing this up?
My question was it, which verses was it?
Which verse in the Bhagavad Gita?
I think that's what you're looking up right now, because you said you had, yes. I think Skip is answering it. But
okay, so Arjuna, keep in mind that in the Bhagavad Gita, this is a single moment in the life of one man whose name is Arjuna. And Arjuna is having this whole book, and there are many versions of it. This is one that Les Morgan doesn't like, and he's the expert on the Bhagavad Gita, but I happen to like for a very special reason, because on August 9th of the year, or I'm sorry, on April the 9th, I'm sorry, May the 9th of, it was May the 9th of the year in which Kushbu and I read the book, and we read it. I read it in 3 forms. She read it in Sanskrit during that whole summer. But I had ordered myself a copy, and before she and I agreed to it, this is the Penguin class of the Bhagavad Gita, which is translated by Laurie Patton, who is now the president of Middlebury College. And it's quite lyrical, but I have a habit of, when I get a book, and I hadn't conjured the idea of reading it, but when I get a book, I open it and see what is on that page as a way of getting into the book. And so anyway, Arjuna is having a conversation with his chariot driver. He's going into battle. His kinsmen are on both sides on the hills above him, and he is betwixt and between. He's in the valley looking up at the two armies, and there are his kinsmen on both armies. And he's very conflicted about which he should go with. And suddenly Krishna appears to him in the form of his chariot driver. And so Arjuna is having this conversation with Krishna in this instant, which is all in this book, right? And this entire book. But in discourse number 10, at verse 18, Arjuna says to Krishna, "Mover of men, tell me again in each detail about the yoga and the form of yourself. I never tire of hearing this nectar." And then here's what Krishna, who is the all-knowing God, the one.
And he's the most attractive God.
Yeah, the
too.
Blessed One. Okay.
Yes.
So Krishna is the Blessed One. And you have to look at some of the imagery that goes with this, that's available everywhere on Google. And you can just look up the Bhagavad-Gita and get lots of images. But here's a beginning of what he says. I'm not going to read the whole thing because it goes on for several pages, but I'll give you a taste of it. And so this is Krishna speaking at discourse number 10, verse 19. The Blessed One said, "Listen, I will tell you the heavenly forms of myself. I will tell you the primary ones, for there is no end to my extent. Best of the Kurus." Best of the Kurus is a epithet for Arjuna. It's a reference to Arjuna. Thick-haired one, that's another reference to Arjuna. "I am the self. I dwell as the refuge of all beings, and I am also the beginning, middle, and end of beings. Among the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Among the great lights, I am the sun shining. Among storm gods, the Maruts, I am their chief, Marichi. Among stars of the zodiac, I am the rabbit-marked moon. Among the Vedas, I am the Sama chant. Among the gods, I am Indra, called Vasava. Among the powers of sense, I am the mind. Among beings, I am thought. Among the Rudras, I am Shankara. Among the Yakshas and the Rakshas, I am Vitesha, Lord of Wealth. Among the Vasus, I am Fire, the Purifier. And among the mountains, I am Meru. Son of Prita," again, a reference to Arjuna, "recognize me as Brahaspati, the head of household priests, the ruler of sacrifice. Among the chief of armies, I am Skanda. Among the waters, I am the ocean. Among great sages, I am Brigu. Of things that are uttered, I am the syllable Om. Among sacrifices, I am soft recitation. Among things that do not move, I am the Himalaya. Among all the trees, I am the Ashvata fig tree. Among heavenly sages, I am Narada. Among the Gandharvas, I am Chief Citraharata. Among those who are fulfilled, I am the wise sage Kapila." And then it goes on, and it goes on and on. But you get the idea. He is all. He is the one. He is the united self, the transcendent self. And so, in the same sense that Jung was afraid to have his thought at age 11, when he had the vision of God defecating on the cathedral basal and destroying it, Jung here, as an adult, nearly 40, is hesitant to open this egg because at some level he knows something is coming and he's not sure what. And this period literally changes his life, and he ends up spending his entire life using this period as the starting point. And many human beings have an aha moment. Okay, they have a numinous moment where they no longer need to believe, they know. Okay, now, when we're children, we need someone to teach us. And so we are taught whatever we are taught by our parents, wherever we are in the world. And unfortunately, those railroad tracks lead to collisions. Okay, we learn things by collisions and eruptions. And so everybody has conflict in their life at some, and probably pretty often. Okay, life is about conflict. And so as children, we're just learning the ropes of how to get along with our mom and get food and get cleaned up. But later we have to learn how to live in a house and live in human civilization and all those things. And all those things start to run up against boundaries. And so God, the transcendent God, is beyond all that. Okay, God is everything. I mean, and that's the magic of this particular passage of the Bhagavad-Gita, because God in the form of Krishna is saying that he's everything, basically, in about 10 pages worth of those verses. And so, ancient Hindus had this long before we got it in the West, long before human beings were probably in Western Europe even, or if they were pretty rough tribes. But in India, they've been reciting, they passed the Bhagavad-Gita along for about 2 millennia, just as an oral tradition, with priests reciting it. And they felt it was that important to them. And they hadn't run up against the rest of the world yet. For the most part, the Indians had not yet run up against the rest of the world, which had developed out from the Olduvai Gorge in Africa, of course. And the Indians had been pretty much left alone behind the Himalayas for millennia. And so they developed it in this way, and it was quite erudite and quite developed. And we can look back at it now with the view of this view I'll show you.
And I just wanted to say, that in that movie Oppenheimer,
yeah,
all the scientists, they were kind of secluded and they had book clubs. They all started reading the Bhagavad Gita. So
I'm sure
there are no coincidences. I hope they show that in the movie.
Yeah, we'll see. So
anyway,
anyway,
I'm death.
Yeah, I have become death. So anyway, this once we got this view, we had to start thinking about it more. Okay, and this is a view that was taken. I forget the lady's name, but Jordan probably remembers it. But she was an astronomer who was on the watch.
Nancy,
say it again.
Let me relook at. I think Nancy. I'm trying to remember. I'll look it up.
On the watch for Voyager 1, and Voyager 1 was passing Saturn, as we can see here in the upper left, and she and a colleague worked out the coordinates to send to Voyager 1 to turn its camera back toward Earth and take a picture of Earth. And this is the pale blue dot that Carl Sagan referred to. Everything that we humans have ever known has taken place there. And so anyway, since then, we've had to figure out, okay, what are we? What is humanity? And obviously we all have our issues that come up in life, and we're blessed with having at least 2 psychologists here with us today, and they often deal with the slings and arrows of life. But we have to get a bigger vision. And so when Jung says the unconscious is God, and he's talking about your unconscious, then he's talking about your God, what is in yourself. When he talks about the collective unconscious, he's talking really about the unconscious of all humanity. And there are, smaller pieces of that collective unconscious in every nation. And so we know that Americans are different from the rest of the world. We know that when people immigrate into the United States and they spend 5 years here, and they study the history of the United States, it's not because they study the history of the United States. That's like taking a driver's test and studying for the driver's exam. That's what it amounts to. But it's difficult for many people because they have to take it in English and maybe now in Spanish after 5 years to become Americans. But once they're Americans, they are not their country of origin. They are Americans, and typically they cannot go back. Okay, they can go back and visit, but they understand that they cannot go back, and that they are American. Okay, and so that's how the collective works in on all of us. And so Jung is starting to get a perception in this passage. Okay, Jung is starting to get a perception that it's something pretty big. And he spends his whole life trying to expand on it. And he's always pretty cagey about it because he was brought up as a Christian, and his father was a Swiss Reformed pastor. And so, he was always pretty cagey about what he meant about religion. But in the fullness of time, we now have, we now know what he was thinking. He came clean about it. And so what we're in here in the Red Book period is him trying to come to grips with this fact, okay, the fact of the image of that Voyager 1 took, okay, because at 2:00 in the morning, this astronomer and her colleague at the University of Arizona, Tucson, worked out the coordinates to take that picture. And then they gave the commands to the spacecraft. They turned it around, took it, and they captured us all of us. And that's what Jung is talking about 60 years earlier. He was recognizing it in his own psyche. And so, and of course, he was familiar with the Bhagavad-Gita by this time and all that. And so what he knows is in the egg is in that image that Voyager 1 took. Okay. That's what that's the incantation that he's making over this egg. Okay, that's what it's about. And he's a little apprehensive about it, as we'll see, but I have to get further along. So let me share my screen again, because I have to get to the next images, and you're going to see exactly how he felt about it. Okay, so here again is the egg, and he says, and we found you in the egg. And then this image is shown. I have slain a precious human sacrifice for you, a youth and old man. I have cut my skin with a knife. Okay, this is the incantation. I have sprinkled your altar with my own blood. I have banished my father and mother so that you can live with me. I have turned my night into day and went about in midday like a sleepwalker. I have overthrown all the gods, broken the laws, eaten the impure. I have thrown down my sword and dressed in women's clothing. I shattered my firm castle and played like a child in the sand. I saw warriors form into line of battle, and I destroyed my suit of armor with a hammer. I planted my field and let the fruit decay. I made small everything that was great and made everything great that was small. I exchanged my furthest goal for the nearest, and so I am ready. Okay, and here's what he was ready for. That is not allowing me to share just now, so let me get the image. Okay, here it is. Okay, so this is how he's feeling at this point as he was doing that incantation. There's the egg, and there's how he feels. And as you can see, there's the snake there, and he feels somewhat like a monster, and he's looking at this egg and wondering what's coming out of it. Okay, and
I think it's what's interesting. I call this making besties with beasties. He's going into the deep part of the ocean, and even if he's terrified, he's living his psyche, living the path into being through these monsters.
Correct. Okay.
Without becoming one, as Nietzsche would jump to.
And so I apologize for not having those images ready for last week.
Skip froze. You froze, Skip. Judith, you had your hand up. Oh, there it is again, up earlier.
And so now I'll read on to any comments on the incantations that we've completed. Well, let's see, I think we've completed. Well, we're having a discussion of the incantations now that's coming up, but any comments there? Go ahead, Judith.
So my question is, a couple of times in these incantations, he has mentioned either overtly or in the footnotes where he wrote later that part of this journey is resting, like taking apart, resting the self from the unconscious. Did I get that right? So that's confusing to me because in some sense, if the unconscious is God or source or divine, it seems like, and even doing the Rocky skip, whether it's the personal unconscious, like Lynn and I have been exploring more as well with Rocky, or whether it's the collective that you're to do it, at the convergence, confluence. It seems like we want to integrate more than that we want to rest them apart. So just leaves me wondering, and I'm okay wondering with it, but if you have any input on that.
I think I don't just resonate. I love that because the resting part, W-R-E-S-T, pulling out,
Right.
crystallizing, that harkens back. I wrote a note a second ago, collisions versus disagreement without conflict. There's dignity in difference. So you're talking about the both and, rather than trying to make a larger scale divine heavenly conflict about, oh, I need to pull this away from the unconscious. No. You're like Arjuna, he's inhabiting the synapse, the interstice, the space between, the void. And to me, that's the silent, non-verbal heart of the matter that sits next to the thoughts. So I think the unconscious goes with the conscious, not pull the self out. It's not drowning. It's just unknown. And I think the comfortability with the not knowing is important. I think that distinction you're making there is actually really wonderfully simply put about how to, that transcendent self that also has the body, both and, not either or, not trying to ascend and become one or the other. It is alive and consequently divine.
Right. And go ahead, Judith. You were going to say something and you're muted. Sorry, you're muted, Judith. Judith, we cannot hear you.
It seems more, the word that comes to mind is non-dual, like you're saying both, Jordan. But
Okay,
that in order to, it's like in Buddhist tradition, they say, you have to somewhat have a self, and we're talking small self here in a way to penetrate through the self to more transcendent self. That if you don't have enough healthy sense of I am here on this planet, on this blue dot, you don't have enough ground to go into the groundless or into the unknown.
Right. Well, let's look at the denouement of the Bhagavad-Gita. Okay. And the denouement of the Bhagavad-Gita is that Arjuna does go into battle, okay, at the end of it. After this instant of realization that he has, he does go into battle. And the self is everything. The self is the chariot, Arjuna as the individual self, and Krishna as the transcendent self. And if you think of the Voyager 1 image, that's our chariot. Okay, that is it. And we got no other. We're learning that we've made the Earth the hottest it's ever been in this past week. And that's our chariot, and we have to have that realization. And we actually have to transcend beyond that, far beyond that. And also in the last couple of weeks, physicists have recognized the graviton waves, the gravitational waves that are coursing through the universe and changing us ever so slightly that it's something like a millionth of a micron or something like that, a very small amount. But they were predicted by Einstein, okay, at the same time, by the way. Okay, I think that's significant that Einstein, in 1905 and 1915, he was going through similar things in physics that Jung was going through in the psyche. This is one of the reasons why, Einstein knew that he couldn't become the president of Israel which he was offered, because he couldn't come back to the worldly. Okay. And Jung, I was critical of him for, most of the time I've been studying him, 37 years now, going on 38 years, 36, 30, going on 37 years. I was critical because I said, why didn't you tell us this stuff? Thank you, Blank Vision, for that.
Even the graviton waves and Einstein goes back to, I can never swim the same river twice, because that micro change of my identity tomorrow, I'm still me and it's still the river I love, but it has modified. So there's
it has changed.
Even in poetry, they've expressed this. And so that's why I kind of find quantum physics it's almost a subset of poetry, because it's always been there. And Judith, like you said, this both and, or you did the non-dual, as it were. And I love that, Jung said for a tree to grow to heaven, its roots must reach to hell. And what's interesting is I love that quote, but I now find it a little vague, because there's a documentary called The Life of Fire. It's about an hour long on Amazon, about specific ecosystems that grow up around island volcanoes that are uninhabited. And they had a short little poem, and it said, the volcano, its head resides in the clouds, reaching out as it does to make new lands continually, resting, its feet firmly planted in the abyss. So there you're talking about the grounding and groundlessness. We can't groundless until we have ground, but the feet firmly planted in the abyss. I love the paradox there of, well, how can you plant in nothingness? But it makes so much both and non-dual sense to me, because to me duality is not the yin yang. It's like you live the path, not either or. And I think either or becomes unbalanced.
Yeah, as soon as you have either or, you're unbalanced. Okay, you can't maintain.
Skip saying more about your years of feeling irritation and kind of where you are now.
Well, I was irritated because Jung knew this stuff before World War I began. Okay, and obviously couldn't do much about World War I. He had this realization. So Jung is in a way like Arjuna at the beginning of the Bhagavad-Gita, when he's trying to figure out, wow, these armies are gathered on both sides, and what am I going to do about it? And then he realizes that the transcendent God is his chariot driver. Okay, and which in the Bhagavad Gita is Krishna, and so Jung has had a similar recognition that he's between these two armies and what is to be done. And he really didn't have a clue. He was a psychiatrist, and he'd been working on individuals for his career, and he'd been built up as a son of a pastor and all that stuff. and so he realizes he has this realization during this Red Book period, which includes the prefigurations, and so, you know, he's as he looks at the egg, Jung is kind of like Krishna at the beginning of the Bhagavad-Gita. But I'm only seeing this in the fullness of time. I'm not seeing this.
You mean Arjuna at the beginning?
Arjuna, I'm sorry, Arjuna at the beginning, yes. And remember, it's the two armies too. So this is duality, actually. And the point that's made in the denouement of the Bhagavad-Gita is that you have to go on with your life. Okay, you have to do something, and yes, some of your kinsmen will be killed. Sorry about that. That's the way life goes. And so, you know, Voyager 1 isn't God looking back at the Earth. Voyager 1's just a mechanical device that we threw out into space in 1976. And it's not the Transcendent, but it gives us a sense. And so Jung has realized that the unconscious.
You just froze for a minute or two, so we didn't get the last part where
Okay.
Arjuna realizes
that he has to go into battle. Okay, that this is the life we have, and in the end, that's what we all have to realize. Okay, we are we all won the lottery. Okay, everybody that's listening to this now or in the future, be I alive right now or dead 50 years, everybody that can hear this has won the lottery. Okay, because all of us are the result of tens of millions of spermatozoa that were released, and yet only one reached the egg, or maybe two if we're twins. Okay, or you know, up to, I don't know how many we could have, but let's say it's one for the time being. So we won that lottery. We won that lottery even before we were conceived, or as we were conceived, we won the lottery. And so basically, I think what that says is we have to stop feeling sorry for ourselves, which is what Arjuna is doing at the beginning, feeling sorry for himself that he has to go into this battle. And we all have to realize, as Arjuna does, that duality is everywhere. That duality is everywhere, and we have to work it out. That's what we live in. We live in duality, and the duality, no matter what it is conflict. And you know, everything that a doctor does in a hospital is contrary to what your physical body wants. Okay, everything. You know, if somebody's giving you a medicine, that medicine is not something that's natural to your human body. It is interfering with your human body in some way, hopefully to make you better. And
Medicine, smaller dose of poison, basically.
Yeah. And everything that, you know, I've had 3 joint replacements, and, you know, those joints are now steel, okay? And they make it possible, because I didn't have to have a head replacement. I can still live my life pretty comfortably, and I can still do this years later. But that wasn't natural. I have to live with that. I have to live that. And so medicine is all about realizing that there's a conflict between, boy, I don't want to cut anybody, and boy, I better be the surgeon that I trained to be and transplant this heart or whatever it is. Right.
Going back to a non-dual and mythology, if I look at Asclepius, okay, there's the medicine and the doctor, but look at his daughter, Hygeia. She's well-being. So the goddess of well-being comes after this scientific, so to speak, Asclepius, but the well-being is the true healing. So you get Hygeia and well-being, and that's what we're talking about here, where he's swimming these midnight oceans, the unconscious. You're doing the Rocky, as Judith brought up, the non-dual. And so I think when the non-dual is present, then you live the path into being, rather than I'm going to be this or that. And it doesn't interfere with identity. I think it makes it more connected to nature.
Okay, so Jung is going through this passage, and it's his real experience. Okay, so that image of the monster looking down at the egg is his real experience, and I think he expressed it, wow, far better than anybody else I can envision. And so going back to your question, though, Judith, we're never going to get the total collective unconscious, okay? And because the total collective unconscious is a step toward transcendence, but it isn't even that, because if we're talking about it, it's duality. There's still an observer, okay? And if there's still an observer, then there's duality, okay? And so in order to reach transcendence, you have to just be, okay? Everything just has to be, okay? And what Jung and what I think a lot of psychology and psychiatry is about, and I don't, at least psychology, if not psychiatry, but at least psychology is about, is letting people learn to be themselves. At least that's my understanding of Jungian psychology, that the Jungians are trying to give you the freedom to be yourself. There's a very telling scene in the movie A Dangerous Method. Okay, and in that there's a patient of Jung's called Otto something, I forget his name. He's also an analyst, but he's somebody who brings Jung along in his thinking, and he's talking about one of his patients, and he says this woman was conflicted between her husband and wanting to be the doctor's lover, or between suicide and becoming the lover of the doctor. And and Jung says, well, okay, what happened? And he said, well, she chose both. In other words, she did start a love affair with this Otto character, who later himself commits suicide in real life. She did have a love affair with him, and then she committed suicide. She was conflicted between the two, and so she chose both. And these are areas that I'm not qualified to speak about. I'm not a mental health professional, and I better stop talking. But the idea, I think that the idea is that Krishna in the Bhagavad-Gita is being Arjuna's psychotherapist. And Arjuna is very conflicted about this battle that he has to enter. And the denouement is that he enters the battle. He has to enter the battle. And that's the truth for all of us, that, you know, we have conflicts all the time. You know, right now I'm moving my office down to my mother-in-law's apartment so that she can move in here so that she could be with us 7x24. And, you know, there's I run into lots of conflict in that, in my own psyche, because I have garbage that's heaped up in my room and I have to decide what to throw away and what not. And so what I'm saying, wait a minute, what I'm saying we're doing at Confluence is we're trying to offer a small window, a small crack into what the collective unconscious is. Okay, the collective of the group. And once we move on from Confluence, from that event, that we won't move on from Confluence, but we have an event where we take a look at what Confluence is about. And that look is brief and it's momentary, but it's like the Bhagavad-Gita. It's a moment in time where you can have an aha moment and you can see through to the transcendent. And when I say that we as a group entered Confluence on May the 7th, 2021, and we haven't ended it since. We are something different. We're different, and it's been a hard path to know that we're different and to see how we're different. And we've had to give up a lot of misconceptions about what we're doing. But in the end, that's it. In the end, we're about, it's the emergence of the feminine. That's what's happening in globally right now. And that brings on huge conflict, of course, in many ways, you know, even more than in the United States, in a place like Afghanistan, for example. But we're giving our attendees an instantaneous picture of the collective for that moment in time. But once you see it, then you're in confluence with us. Then you'll be different. And I can't express it because it's inexpressible. Okay, you have to experience it. I can't teach it per se. I can talk about it. And so what I realized, Judith, is that Jung realized that he could talk until he was blue in the face between World War I and World War II, and it would have made absolutely no difference. Okay. And because the answer is not in the rational. Okay. It's not in speeches, it's not in books. The answer comes from the transcendent. And you know, the transcendent said, you know, what this guy Hitler is doing is bloody awful, and we have to stop it. And Jung knew that he couldn't stop it by just talking about it and talking about these ideas that are so far out that nobody would listen. Okay. And so one first has to experience the confluence, and then we have to take it back into our communities in some way. And the confluences are limited way to try to bring it back into our communities, something that began between Tim and me on May the 7th, 2021. And I cannot tell you in the end what that is. I can tell you it is there. And I can never tell you about that per se, but I can tell you that once you dip into this, you will be changed, and it will be starting to change the world. And we have two young men who attended, who came from Columbus, Ohio. One of them is watching this program right now. I know he is because I know what his handle is. And I'm sure he would tell you that you can't exactly describe what happened at Confluence 22 when we did this the first time. But he and his twin brother attended Confluence 22. And they assure us that they will attend Confluence 23 as well, because even though they aren't people who you would typically think of as wanting to attend an event like this, they definitely are the right people. And one of them is here live right now. Well, I'm not going to say what he's saying on YouTube right now, but in any case, I believe he and his brother will be with us in Mount Madonna, and they are among. There were many local Helena residents which participated one way or another, but these are individuals who aren't psychologically trained, who have been connected with this YouTube channel for years, and who, assure me that they will be in Mount Madonna in November. And so anyway, Jung just realized that there was nothing rational that could be done. Okay, and there's nothing rational that we can do. I can't change the world. I can't have people see transcendence. This is why Jung said, that I'm not a religion. Because I can't tell you how to get there. I can give you signposts or something like that. But and so what we are at this moment, when he's looking at this egg in the image that we were looking at, is him at the moment in time when he's realizing that in that egg is transcendence, and the God who is Debar before this, his personal God, perhaps you could talk about it that way, is going to be something different when the egg is opened. And that's the fear that he's showing in that image. And The monster is his personal self, and the egg is the transcendence, which is going to pop up and it's going to consume the rest of his life.
What's interesting about Arjuna, I think the hidden snapshot is that Arjuna and that picture, there is no conflict. It's one moment in the egg of potential where Arjuna and the chariot are navigating that serpentine path of the yin-yang symbol. They have a foot on both sides, neither foot on both sides, both of those. And then they are within that place between. And so there's that one moment in the egg of potential that's a seed of transcendence, of enlightenment to potentially come, where instead of conflict, there is experience. And
Arjuna is all of us. Okay, it's all of us every day and all the conflicts that we have.
Well, I'm saying at that point, in that moment, there is no conflict. There's potential, but there's this peace and this silence, which is intense, of that view down between both sides, that in that moment, that is the egg of potential of transcendence, because the capital S silence that's there becomes transcendent. But then the story, and of course, then they come crashing together. But at the same time, I think that one moment is a hidden snapshot of transcendence and silence, which is the space, the 4-character voice of the universe, A, U, M. And people say, well, that's only 3 letters. The 4th character is the silence within, between, and all around. And I think that's that path between Arjuna, the 2 sides on either side of the chariot.
Has this been helpful, Judith? I'm not sure that I've answered your question.
Yes, you have. And, it's just appreciate hearing the depth that you've been swimming and appreciating and wondering. And I think when you share that with us, it opens my wondering and finding my way with this work. But I understand your irritation now and how he knew blue in the face wouldn't work, even though it must have been very painful for him to be in these years and go through these times with this kind of.
I'm sure it was incredibly difficult.
Knowing.
As it was also for Neumann, who was in Israel during this 5-year period and completely cut off from his confluence. There's a question on YouTube that I want to answer, which was the Otto that I referred to, Otto Rank, and it isn't. It's Otto Gross is the person's name. And Otto Gross was the person that was in that scene, which is in A Dangerous Method. Okay. And of course, the events that occur during A Dangerous Method, during that movie, occur before the Red Book period. Okay. They occur during the time that Jung was interacting with Freud. And so that is depicted in that movie as his interactions with Freud. But what is not depicted is the break between the 2 of them at the end. And then putting everything into context for him, because Jung was acting as a psychiatrist during that movie. He was dealing with Sabine Spielrein as a patient, and he then got into an affair with Sabine Spielrein. That's quite evident from all the documentation now. Many have criticized the movie, but nonetheless, it's a very powerful explanation of the conflicts that Jung was facing as a young psychiatrist at that point in time. Okay, and when he's like 30 years old when he meets Sabine Spielrein, and I don't want to go into that movie anymore, but that is the period leading up to his break with Freud, and it's his break with Freud that triggers the Red Book period. Okay, and so now Jung is looking at the egg. I want to get through this next passage, and I just want to point out one thing on a quick screen share here. This next passage is covered on this page of the Red Book, page 62 of the original Red Book, the large folio volume. And the part that's in larger letters here is a part that in Shamdasani's English language Red Book is in italics. Okay, and so I just want to mention that. I'm not going to leave this on the screen because I think most of us can't read German, and especially Jung's handwriting, but I just wanted to mention that. So this is a prose section of this, and so he's gone through the incantations, and then he says, however, I am not ready, since I have still not accepted that which chokes my heart. That fearful thing is the enclosing of the God in the egg. I am happy that the great endeavor has been successful, but my fear made me forget the hazards involved. I love and admire the powerful. No one is greater than he with the bull's horns, and yet I lamed, carried, and made him smaller with ease. I almost slumped to the ground with fear when I saw him, and now I rescue him with a cupped hand. These are the powers that make you afraid and conquer you. These have been your gods and your rulers since time immemorial, yet you can put them in your pocket. What is blasphemy compared to this? I would like to be able to blaspheme against the God. That way I would at least have a God whom I could insult, but it is not worth blaspheming against an egg that one carries in one's pocket. That is a God against whom one cannot blaspheme. I hated this pitifulness of the God. My own unworthiness is already enough. I cannot bear my encumbering it with the pitifulness of the God. Nothing stands firm. You touch yourself and you turn to dust. You touch the God and he hides terrified in the egg. You force the gates of hell. The sound of clacking masks and the music of fools approaches you. You storm heaven's stage scenery totters, and the prompter in the box falls into a swoon. You notice you are not true. It is not true above. It is not true below. Left and right are deceptions. Wherever you grasp is air, air, air. But I have caught him, he who has been feared since time immemorial. I have made him small, and my hand surrounds him. That is the demise of the gods. Man puts them in his pocket. That is the end of the story of the gods. Nothing remains of the gods other than an egg, and I possess this egg. Perhaps I can eradicate this last one, and with this finally exterminate the race of gods. Now that I know that the gods have yielded to my power, what are the gods to me now? Old and overripe, they have fallen and been buried in an egg. But how did this happen? I felled the great one. I mourned him. I did not want to leave him, since I loved him, because no mortal being rivals him. Out of love, I devised the trick that relieved him of heaviness and freed him from the confines of space. I took from him, out of love, form and corporeality. I enclosed him lovingly in the maternal egg. Should I slay him, the defenseless one whom I loved? Should I shatter the delicate shell of his grave and expose him to the weightlessness and unboundedness of the winds of the world? But did I not sing the incantations for his incubation? Did I not do this out of love for him? Why do I love him? I do not want to tear the love for the Great One from my heart. I want to love my God and the defenseless and hopeless one. I want to care for him like a child. Are we not sons of the gods? Why should gods not be our children? If my father, the god, should die, a god child should arise from my maternal heart, since I love the God and do not want to leave him. Only he who loves the God can make him fall, and the God submits to his vanquisher and nestles in his hand and dies in the heart of him who loves him and promises him birth. Okay, now here's the part that's much larger in the calligraphic text and therefore in italics. My God, I love you as a mother loves the unborn whom she carries in her heart. Grow in the egg of the East, nourish yourself from my love, drink the juice of my life, so that you will become a radiant God. We need your light, O child. Since we go in darkness, light up our paths. May your light shine before us. May your fire warm the coldness of our life. We do not need your power, but life. Okay, that's the end of the italics. And then he says, what does power avail us? We do not want to rule. We want to live. We want light and warmth, and hence we need yours. Just as the greening earth and every living body needs the sun, so we as spirits need our light, your light and your warmth. A sunless spirit becomes the parasite of the body, but the God feeds the spirit. And then there's image 62 and 63 and 64. I think I probably have those. Let me just double check. I guess I do. Just a moment. All right. So the references to 63 and 64 here, which I'm now going to show you. And here is here's 63, and here's let's see. Okay, wait a minute. And here's 64. And so in 64, down at the bottom, you see Jung himself bending over in an attitude of supplication and prayer. And in the middle of it is the egg. You can see that at the bottom of the page. And from this egg comes the fire of what he's afraid of. And so I want to read these footnotes here. In dreams, Jung noted on February 4th, 1917, started work on the opening of the egg image. This indicates that the image depicts the regeneration of Izdubar from the egg. Concerning the solar barge in this image, image number 55 in the facsimile edition, and above note 128. And then image number 133, footnote 133, image legend Katapata Brahmanam, Satapata Brahmanam, Sacred Books of the East, volume 12, provides the cosmological justification behind the Agnihotra. It commences by describing how Prajapati, desiring to be reproduced, produced Agni from his mouth. Prajapati offered himself to Agni, and saved himself from death as he was about to be devoured. The Agnihotra, fire healing, is a Vedic ritual performed at sunrise and sunset. The performers purify themselves, light a sacred fire, and chant verses and a prayer to Agni, which is fire. Okay. Okay. Now I want to just.
Well, and fire is an excellent metaphor for that space between in Arjuna. You can't catch fire, but you do experience it. I mean, so you reach out to grab something that is definitely there, but it's ungrabbable. So I think fire is a wonderful metaphor for that space between that's experienced, but also that nothingness in a way, because you can't reach out and grab it.
Okay, so I do want to read at least the very first part of the opening of the egg, which is the next chapter. It's on page 306 of the Reader's Edition. And I want to read the footnote since it relates to everything we've been talking about. January 10th, 1914. So he started really on Christmas Day, 1913, having this series of active imaginations. And so in Black Book 3, Jung wrote, "It appears as if something has been achieved through this memorable event, but it is incalculable where this will all lead. I hardly dare say that Izdubar's fate is grotesque and tragic, for that is what our most precious life is. The Vishers is the first attempt to elevate this truth to a system. He rightly deserves a place among the immortal." Okay, he's referring to Father Theodore Vischer, I guess, who lies in the middle of it. Middle is the truth. It has many faces. One is certainly comical, another sad, a third evil, a fourth tragic, a fifth funny, a sixth is a grimace, and so forth. Should one of these faces become particularly obtrusive, we thus recognize that we have deviated from certain truth and approach an extreme that constitutes a definite impasse. Should we decide to pursue this route, it is a murderous task to write. The wisdom of real life, particularly if one has committed many years of serious scientific research. What proves to be most difficult is to grasp the playfulness of life, the childish, so to speak. All the manifold sides of life, the great, the beautiful, the serious, the black, the devilish.
You froze.
Capable of
You
regulating.
froze it devilish.
Okay. All manifold sides of life, the great, the beautiful, the serious, the black, the devilish, the good, the ridiculous, the grotesque, are fields of application which each tend to wholly absorb the beholder or describer. Our time requires something capable of regulating the mind. Just as the concrete world has expanded from the limitedness of the ancient outlook to the immeasurable diversity of our modern outlook, the world of intellectual possibilities is developed to unfathomable diversity. Infinitely long paths paved with thousands of thick volumes lead from one specialization to another. Soon no one will be able to walk down these paths anymore, and then only specialists will remain. More than ever, we require the living truth of the life of the mind, of something capable of providing firmer guidance. Vischer's work was auch ein rest in mind, I don't know. In 1921, it was published in 1884. In 1921, Jung wrote, Vischer's novel, Auch gives a deep insight into this side of the introverted state of soul, and also into the underlying symbolism of the collective unconscious. Jung, in 32, Jung commented on Vischer in Psychology of the Kundalini Yoga, page 54. Yes, that's it. Sorry. Okay, let me open the other here, and then I'll do the last footnote. So I think that Jung came to a conclusion that there's no teaching what he's saying. You have to either grok it or you don't. Okay. At this point, I think I've grokked it. And any effort I make to try to describe it is wholly inadequate, which is the same point that Jung is making here. Okay. In other words, when you've got it, you've got it. And, you know, he said in his interview on YouTube, I have no need to believe I know. And it took me, after I saw that, and I said to myself, I too know. Okay, at that moment that I first saw it, I said, I too know. I spent 10 years trying to understand what it is that I know. And what I know cannot be conveyed in words. Okay, it's simple. And it has to be experienced. I think that at Confluence 23, we will be offering a skeleton key to that experience. I hope we will. I expect we will. It is not a teaching, so, you know, it's just like all the words that we've had in this series since the beginning. You know, Jung wasn't it. This wasn't the time. The Red Book time is him struggling with his own issues. Obviously, the answer to your question, Judith, is Jung saw that anything that he would say during the interwar years would have fallen on deaf ears. It couldn't be understood. And even near his death, he said about the publication of the Red Book, who would understand it? And what he meant by that is who would grok it, who would get it. Okay, that's what he meant. And if you don't understand what the word grok is, Grok, please go look up the word grok in Wikipedia.
Well, you know, I resonate with your frustration there, because I had the same. And even when I get to non-dual and I jump to both, and I have to kind of turn around and stop being a hypocrite and go, okay, Jordan, you're frustrated with him for why didn't he tell the world? Because this is the way. And I go, okay, well, how would I tell it? And I go, oh yeah, how do I convince someone of the inexpressible? You know, and well, I have to express it, but not express it. But then I stop and just go, oh, okay. And so it's a beautiful paradox in this life thing, that we're all in.
Yeah. So the point is that some of us in our organizers group have grokked it. Others, some better than others. I guess we've all grokked it at some level, and some better than others. All we can do is point. Okay, all we can do is point at the transcendent, and the transcendent is beyond the collective unconscious. It's on the other side of it, as proven by the image of Voyager 1. And so I'm going to read this one more segment, which is about opening the egg, and then we'll call it a day.
Can I just add one quote?
Sure, sure, please.
It's not from the Bhagavad-Gita, it's from something called the Guru Gita, but I
Mhm.
love it a lot because the translation says, he who thinks he knows nothing, but he who knows that he does not know, he's the one who knows.
Yeah, right. And that's a great quote also. And I have to concur with that. I mean, when I say I know, that's a bit of a affectation. Okay.
But there's the deep gut knowing, and then it's no words. And so I love that those who say they know do not. So
right.
I love that you wrote that quote in.
And my favorite quote on this, along this line, is if you see the Buddha coming toward you down the road, kill him. And the point is that that the person who says that they're so special is by definition not.
And then the Buddha on the road is your mirage of self projected into, so you eliminate that and you reside in nature instead of the blind spot of the mirage of the Buddha. Right. So it's dispelling blind spots.
And I just want to make a point to Lynn, because she and I were having a conversation yesterday. Debbie had made this point about these images that I showed you, and I don't want to get into that for the group, but I just want to say that we looked at all those images together. We watched video for a couple of hours, and what it told me is that it's nice art, and it maybe moves a lot of people along the path, but I thought it was, I'd like to go see that place at some point, but those people are the Buddha coming on the path. Okay, and so at the end, as I reflected on it, and Debbie's got these cards, and I'm not going to advertise the cards because I don't want to mislead people. But there's 22 cards. It just left me cold in the end. And that's their path, and I'm glad that they found it, but it isn't my path. Maybe I hope it helps others, as I expect all religions help people along the path. And so I just leave it at that. And Judith and I were conversing yesterday about the significance of some Rocky work that I've been doing, and I don't want to get into it further than that right now. But
Judith and I actually have a retreat this morning, so I'm going to be saying goodbye too. But thank you.
Okay, well, enjoy your retreat, and I'm going to wrap up in 5 minutes anyway, but so I'm just going to read this next section. The opening of the egg. On the evening of the third day, I kneeled down on the rug and carefully opened the egg. Something resembling smoke rises up from it, and suddenly Izdubar is standing before me, enormous, transformed, and complete. His limbs are whole, and I find no trace of damage on them. It's as if he had awoken from a deep sleep. He says, "Where am I? How narrow it is here. How dark, how cool. Am I in the grave? Where was I? It seemed to me as if I had been outside the universe. Over and under me was an endlessly dark, star-glittering sky, and I was in a passion of unspeakable yearning. Streams of fire broke from my radiating body. I surged through blazing flames. I swam in a sea that wrapped me in living fires, full of light, full of longing, full of eternity. I was ancient and perpetually renewing myself, falling from the heights to the depths and whirling, glowing from the depths to the heights, hovering around myself amidst glowing clouds, as raining embers beating down like the foam of the surf, engulfing myself in stifling heat, embracing and rejecting myself in a boundless game. Where was I? I was completely sun." And there's a footnote. Rosher notes that as a god, Izdubar is associated with the sun god. The incubation and rebirth of Izdubar follows the classic pattern of solar myths. In a German book, Leo Frobenius pointed out the widespread motif of a woman becoming pregnant through a process of immaculate conception and giving birth to the sun god, who develops in a remarkably short period of time. Sorry. In some forms, he incubates in an egg. Frobenius related this to the setting and rising of the sun in the sea. Jung cited this work on a number of occasions in Transformations of Symbols of the Libido in 1912. So it's a German book. I would urge you to look at the footnote in the book and buy yourself a red book if you don't have it already.
Well, maybe next week we open up with that Izdubar, what he was saying, because it's such a poignant, simple, short, poetic, where was I? Was I in the grave? And the whole birth and death. That's such a beautiful passage there with Izdubar speaking.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I somehow changed my view screen here. I don't know why. Anyway, so that's all that for today. I think we've done a lot today, and
thank you.
I'm personally spent.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything more I can add to what I've said. And
Agree.
So I'm going to call it an end, and thank you all for being here. Bye-bye.